Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemer's Bible. Now, somebody had informed me that there are 1,189 chapters in the Bible. So, at the rate of one chapter per week, it would take us just under 23 years to finish it. So, we're going to try to be a little bit more efficient, see if we can pick up the pace a bit. As normal, we have the usual assemblage. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, we are missing a couple of people for personal reasons, and heart goes out to them and all of that. Anybody want to begin, or anybody have any opening comments?
So unless you guys have anything to say about these, I do want to open up about these following chapters a little bit. So actually, I'm mostly talking about 39 through 41, and I don't know how far we will get today, but we will see. And now 39 is apparently the most elegantly symmetrical episode in Genesis, according to Robert Alter. But I guess we'll see that if we'll see that on our own. We don't need his help for that. So for this section at least, so 39 through 41, and then actually part of 47 as well. It seems that a lot of scholars believe this was a self-contained story. So it actually would have arisen after there was already a Joseph story, and this one would have been a separate tradition on it. So this commentary, sorry, not this commentary. So there's this paper by Lauren Monroe in the Joseph story between Egypt and Israel, where she notes, though I understand Genesis 39 through 41 to have originated as an independent literary work, I do not regard this composition as having been produced of whole cloth. I share Romer's sense that Joseph's encounter with Potiphar's wife is an independent Joseph tradition, either modeled on or shaped by the same influences as the Egyptian New Kingdom text, The Tale of Two Brothers, which, by the way, I did read through it. It sounds a lot like Cain and Abel, honestly, Tale of Two Brothers. In fact, Genesis, except there's, a cheating wife. In fact, Genesis 39 through 41 may consist of several independent Joseph traditions that provided the building blocks for the Joseph the Hebrew story, much as the old Babylonian Gilgamesh epic was composed from independent Sumerian Gilgamesh vignettes. Among these independent traditions might have been at least one story of Joseph, interpreter of dreams, as well as a story of Joseph, the benevolent administrator in Pharaoh's court. So you can kind of see how they're building up a biblical Joseph tradition. Several details in Genesis 39 through 41 set it apart from the surrounding narrative. For example, there is no reference to herding as Joseph's mode of economic subsistence, a characterization that is essential to Genesis 37 and the larger Jacob narrative. Famously, Genesis 39 refers to Joseph's master. However, the name Potiphar appears to be an invention of the scribes who produced Genesis 37. As such, it appears to be as such, it provides a necessary bridge between the world occupied by Joseph's brothers in Canaan and the household in Egypt where he is a servant. And then the rest gets into a bit more detail than that, but that was just a very interesting note I found on that about the construction of Joseph stories over time and how they kind of conglomerated into one.
Thank you much for that. Anybody want to start the reading?
Maybe Xerxes?
Xerxes.
I sorry, I don't know how to
Xerox.
say. I don't know how to say this in properly. So
Yeah, we'll remember that on the next time I pronounce a Hebrew word.
I mean, I can. I suppose I can read.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
I
So
yeah, I suggest we do 5 verses every time, so we can get commentary for this.
All right.
I'll take a note of that. All right. So, chapter 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, courier of Pharaoh, the high chamberlain, an Egyptian man, brought him from the hands of the Ishmaelites, who had brought him down Gotta turn the page. Who had brought him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and all that he did the Lord made succeed in his hand. And Joseph found favor in his eyes, and he ministered to him, and he put him in charge of his house, and all that he had he placed in his hands.
That takes us up to 5, right?
Did it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That'd be fine.
Okay, Tomer,
Alright.
did you have commentary for that?
Yeah, about verse 3. His master saw that the Lord was with him. So Rashi comments here that the name of God was a familiar word in Joseph's mouth. Nachmanides, however, rejects this and writes that Potiphar saw that his endeavors were always more successful than that of anyone else, so he knew that success came to Joseph from God.
Okay. Right.
Um,
Anybody else?
there is also commentary about, why does this story come here? Like before, we had like the story of Judah and Tamar, and it was like, why does this story come in here? It interrupts the flow of the story of Joseph. And then this one kind of comes afterwards, and it's like, why does this one come now? And there is a tradition, I think Rashi brings it up, that they want to juxtapose the wife of the master with Tamar, just like Tamar, what she kind of was doing it for a good cause because she foresaw that her descendants would be, that she had to have someone from the seed of Judah and her descendants would be kings or whatever. So too, the wife of the master foresaw that she would have children through Joseph, and she didn't know that it was supposed to be her daughter, not her. So they're trying to say this was what she did was had good intentions.
Okay. And we are. I'll pick up the reading from here because I just feel like it. And I'm reading from the NIV. Lauren, Lawrence, is there another version would be
Lord.
better for me?
Well, I mean, the NIV works. The RSV is used a lot as well.
RSV.
Yeah, or the NRSV.
All right.
That's
Well,
the one I use is the NRSV.
Yeah.
gotcha.
Did I have? Yeah, I think I did have one thing to note for the entirety of the Joseph story, actually. So the use here of like the importance of God in these actions, right? So as a character, God doesn't appear the same way that he did in earlier texts, because in earlier texts he is a character saying and doing things. In the Joseph story, he's really not. And that is very similar to something like there's a section in Daniel. There's of course, the whole book of Esther. Basically, I don't even think it includes the word God. So it kind of reminds me of that kind of, well, God is meant to be behind all this stuff, but we're not gonna outright, say that he is doing stuff. That kind of subtle difference there. And I wanted to point that out because those two stories, both both Daniel and Esther. I mean, Esther a little bit earlier, granted, than Daniel, but they come from a later period, and this could represent that, being written in a later period.
Okay, so we got a couple of chats here. Minute Rice offers $5, thank you, and says, I was going to wait to send a super chat, but that kick-ass Godzilla shirt deserves some support. Well, thank you for that. And then Ivory Darkness says, have you ever heard of the religious group Updog?
Oh,
Don't do it, Arn.
Don't.
Don't.
No.
Never heard of it.
No,
Question
don't.
shouldn't even be up there. All right, so I'm going to start reading. And this is from verse 5. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in his house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care, with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's house took notice of Joseph and said, Come to bed with me. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, Everything he owns is entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing against and a sin against God? And though he spoke
Okay,
to Joseph every day or day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her.
okay. So, verse 6 about accept the food that he ate. So, according to Bereshit Rabbah 86:6, the food is a euphemism for Potiphar's wife. So, yeah.
which I
Even
like, which I like because this, like, Orthodox translation translates it as, "For except the crumpet that he ate," which I think is
Ooh,
quite
ooh.
lovely euphemism.
so Ibn Ezra, however, rejects this and writes that Joseph was not permitted even to touch Potiphar's food because, according to Genesis 43:32, the Egyptians did not eat food with the Hebrews because that was an abomination to them.
Hmm.
It
Yeah,
was
And
an abomination for an Egyptian to dine with a Jew.
yeah, that's in Genesis 43:32. It reads that way. We'll
yeah.
get to that.
This is one of the things that kind of tells us about how segregated they were. Um, so it seems like you're gonna notice this a lot. So there are parts in the Joseph story that seem to go against a whole bunch of stuff that we are going to read, that we have read even throughout the Bible. Just a lot of cultural differences, it seems, and the segregation isn't like one of those things. It seems to be like they for example, in the Joseph story, intermarriages are allowed, while in Ezra and Nehemiah they are very much not allowed. And the the idea here is that this comes from a period where you have a uh, some kind of animosity between the two groups, but there has been some kind of, at least a little bit of, cultural melding. Um, so like you're allowed to do certain things with other people, but then in some contexts you're just not. So it's a very for them it would have been at the time a very touchy subject. um, so that is one thing that we will notice throughout it. And I think I had something on. Oh, right, okay. So where it says that Joseph is, like, built and handsome. Hey, Aaron, are you Joseph? Because you're built and handsome. That's a
uh,
pickup line.
Are you
I
coming
also
on to my husband?
I am, yes.
I've also had a comment from about Joseph was well built and handsome. So Nachmanides comments that this verse intended to indicate that it was an account of his good looks that Potiphar's wife cast her eyes upon him. Rashi, however, comments, as soon as he saw that he was ruler in the house, he began to eat and drink and curl his hair. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, your father is mourning, and you curl your hair. I will let a bear loose against you. That is, I shall let temptation loose against you.
Yep. And then the next verse begins with, after these things or words. You could say, after these words of God, this thing happened. I did want to bring up now quickly just I made like a mistake a couple of weeks ago where I said um, something about Potiphar and Potiphar being his wife and whatever. That was a mistake. But there is, I guess you could say, like a liberal Jewish interpretation of this whole story of Joseph as being like a bit of a hidden story about um, non-binary identity or whatever, because of the different languages used about Joseph in the past chapters. In this one, this is one example where it says he was built and handsome. It's the identical phrase that's used for Leah, the wife of Jacob, where it says, not Leah, Rachel. Like, remember it says Leah had not nice eyes, but Rachel was beautiful or whatever. It's exactly the same expression, and with the curling hair and all of that stuff. So the only real traditional interpretation that's relevant to this is there is in the Talmud. It says that Potiphar was castrated for the way he treated Joseph, and he became Potiphar. And so Potiphar is a person that is mentioned later as the father-in-law of Jacob. Like he marries the daughter of Potiphar, and the traditional understanding it is Potiphar and Potiphar are the same person, and he became a eunuch as a punishment, and so as a eunuch, he's called Potiphar. So traditional story, very liberal way of looking at the story. They kind of contradict, but religion, yeah.
Yeah.
Mind
Yeah,
if I pick up
noticed
the
that
reading?
in the chat,
Wait.
someone says, Lorraine Drosophila says, LOL, Joseph was a WAP maker. So,
Did you read? Did you read?
It's everything that Ben Shapiro wishes he could be.
Did you read verse 10, Aaron?
what's
I
that?
think you did.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah.
So I have a comment on here. About she spoke to Joseph day after day. The Babylonian Talmud in Yomah 35b describes Potiphar's wife's effort to seduce Joseph. It reads, "They said about Joseph the righteous, each and every day the wife of Potiphar seduced him with words. In addition, the clothes that she wore to entice him in the morning, she did not wear to entice him in the evening. The clothes that she wore to entice him in the evening, she did not wear to entice him in the morning the next day." And I should point out that according to Islamic tradition, Potiphar's wife is named Zulikha, and I've read that in the book of Jasher they support that this is her name, but in other Jewish traditions it's not.
Okay.
And she has different names in Christian stories and paintings and stuff like that. There's quite a few different names that come up, and some of them are reused again and again. But yeah.
All right. Does somebody else want to read or me again?
I'll take it if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead. You've got a strong baritone. Let's hear from you.
One day, however, when he went into the house to do his work, and while no one else was in the house, she caught hold of his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called out to the members of her household and said to them, "See, my husband has brought among us a Hebrew to insult us. He came in to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And when he heard me raise my voice and cry out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside. Then she kept his garment by her until his master came home, and she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came into me to insult me. But as soon as I raised my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside."
So about verse 11 to attend these duties. According to Talmud, Sotah 36b, Rav and Shmuel engage in a dispute with regard to its meaning. One says it means that he went into the house to do his work, literally. And one says he entered the house in order to fulfill his sexual needs with her.
But he saw a vision of his father, which stopped him. Is that a thing?
I don't know. I just quoted from the Talmud.
I think
That's a
maybe
really
it's
weird way
Rashi says
to
it.
interpret that, given like his adamancy against not doing that with her.
No, you're right. Rashi here comments, a vision of his father's face appeared to him, and he resisted temptation and did not sin, as it stated in. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it is a bit weird. Rashi also I think brings it up that on that day, what was special about that day? It was the house was empty because it was a holiday or something.
Yeah,
and
he writes.
she stayed at home by pretending that she was ill or something.
Yeah,
So
he writes
why
a
would he
day.
go back? Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted you, but he writes
But
a
I just want
day
to
of.
say, so maybe Rashi's thing with the wish, maybe the story of why, oh, he went in to fulfill his desires with her is be like he knew that she was the only one in the house, so why did he go in? And that maybe that's
Yeah.
where the explanation comes from.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I interrupted you, but I wanted to say that Rashi said here, a day of merriment, a day of their sacred feast, when they all went to the temple of their idols.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
We can just finish off the chapter because it's not very long left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But first about verse 14. To make sport with us, so of us. So the word that is used for in the NIV it is sport, but the word that is used for to sport is letzachek. And if you remember previously, we've talked about this word in several connotations, like murder or idolatry. So the verse is the
Also,
word is in the sexual connotation.
yeah, also in the story of Abraham and his wife, was it Pharaoh or Melchizedek looked out the window and saw them playing with each other, and it uses the same word, I think. And there it means something sexual.
Okay. When his master heard of the words that his wife spoke to him, saying, "This is the way your servant treated me," he became enraged. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he remained there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. He gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper.
So about verse 19, this is how your slave treated me. So Rashi comments that she said this while having sex with him, saying he did things like these to me. Like she demonstrated what he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a little bit out there. That actually is noted in Alter. He does point out Rashi's fanciful imagining.
But doesn't he get it from somewhere else? Doesn't she get it from? Sorry, doesn't Rashi get it from? Oh, where was it? I saw.
I think it was Shit
Uh,
Rabbami. No.
yeah, Bereshit Rabbah 87:9.
Okay. So we have verse 4.
I've always
we
wondered
have
is
chapter
like
40, sir.
it was yeah, it was pretty commonplace back then for like masters and their wives to have sex with their slaves. Like that
Yeah,
wasn't
I think they
a
called that
taboo thing
property
to do.
rights.
Yeah. And it confuses me a little bit because if Zuleika had told Joseph to lie with her, he wouldn't have had a choice in the matter to begin with. Like that alone, she could have taken to Potiphar and he would have been punished for that. All right. Well, going on to 40.
Okay.
Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker offended their lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he waited on them, and they continued for some time in custody. One night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker, the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison. I'm glad that we have to keep repeating that just to make sure we know who we're talking about here.
Yeah,
Each his
that's
own
really
dream,
impressive.
and each dream with its own meaning.
Yeah. So
When Joseph came
sorry, go ahead. Finish the verse.
When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there was no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me."
All right.
Okay.
So I did want to have a note about actually the first section of this before we get into the dreams of the people in prison. So the source critics, where it says in verse 4, and the high chamberlain assigned Joseph to them, and he ministered to them. The source critics take this as a flat contradiction of the end of chapter 39, where Joseph is appointed as general supervisor of the prison, serving as a kind of managing warden. But in fact, Joseph's ministering to the two courtiers need not imply a menial role. These two prisoners had occupied important places in the court, and Pharaoh may yet pardon them. So it makes perfect sense that they should be singled out for special treatment in prison, to be attended personally by the warden's right hand man. There is another seeming discrepancy with the preceding report of Joseph's incarceration. There, the prison was run by a prison warden, whereas here it is governed by the high chamberlain, the title assigned to Potiphar himself at the beginning of chapter 39. But it is easy enough to imagine the high chamberlain as a kind of minister of justice, bureaucratically responsible for the royal prisoners, with the warden answering to him. But yeah, that's it's up to you guys how you see it.
Yeah, one of
Um,
the interpretations of his title is head executioner, so that would make sense.
yeah. So about verse 1, offended their master. So according to Bereshit Rabbah 88:2, a fly was found in the goblet of aromatic wine of the cupbearer, and a pebble was found in the loaves that the baker baked. It also adds the opinion that they sought to marry the king's daughter. Targum Jonathan adds that that they had taken counsel to throw poison into the king's food and drink.
I want to throw in that this story is the only story that appears in the Quran in more or less its entirety. Everything else, but the Quran makes references to a bunch of things that are in the Bible, but it's kind of like the Reader's Digest version at best. The Quran authors assumed that everybody already knew these stories and so didn't bother to tell them all again, except for this one. And I don't remember what they were exactly, but it took a little bit of liberties, so there's, the story is different in the Quran, but it's essentially the same thing. And this is the only actual story, full out story that is in there. Just for pure interest, I wanted to throw out.
And so about verse 5, Rashi comments here. I mean, the Rashi explanation is taking the word for dream, chalom, as construct case. Each dreamed the dream of both of them, i.e., he dreamed his own dream and the interpretation of the other's dream. This is what it means when it states in verse 16, and the chief baker saw that he had interpreted well. Nachmanides, however, questions this. He writes, now what sense does it make for Pharaoh's chief butler to say, we have dreamt a dream consistent with the interpretation, thereby minimizing the wisdom of the interpreter? Besides, Pharaoh's dream, related later on, may not have been so, that is, consistent with the interpretation, and Joseph would not know it. Even Ezra writes that each one of them saw in his dreams details that could be interpreted to foretell what would happen in the future.
So
And who's reading?
I'm not sure if this part matters all too much, but Tomer, maybe you, or Tomer and Isaac, I should say, maybe you guys can help out with this. So in verse 5, so it says, at least Alter uses the translation, so the second part of it, on a single night, each dream with its own solution. So although a long tradition of translations opts for interpretation here, the Hebrew verb, I'm sure Tomer will correct me, patar, is, and its cognate noun suggests decipherment. Compare the related term pesher used in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There is one conclusive decoding for every dream, and a person who is granted insight can break the code. So do you guys see a solution there as a working translation?
The word that is used is pitron, which in modern Hebrew it's solution, but according to BDB dictionary, it can be read as interpretation of a dream. All the verses that feature this word pitron or its derivations are related to dream interpretation.
Okay, that makes sense. All right.
I did want to bring down the verse 1 where it says, and it came after these events. Rashi adds like a whole extra story about Potiphar's wife, and it says this cursed woman spoke badly about this man, the righteous man, and uh, and and the, uh, and therefore, all of people were speaking badly about him, and because of this, God interceded and made these two servants of the king um, make a mistake or whatever, so that the people's attention would fall on them rather than him. And this kind of brings in a bit of a like a Jewish traditional question, which is like Rashi says at the beginning of the story that she was doing things righteously, and here it says she's a cursed woman, and so the explanation is that she realized after what happened that, okay, so it was my daughter was supposed to be his wife, and she didn't want him in prison to like get freed and run away, so she wanted to keep him in prison longer, so she spoke bad about him. And it's interesting to see how these like weird sort of tales come in and trying to protect her name or whatever. Yeah. And there's like traditional like Jewish like morals you're supposed to learn out the story or whatever, but that's not as interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joseph is interesting compared to his father and brothers, and his grandfather and all of his ancestors. Like he seems to not be doing anything underhanded, or he seems more blameless, more righteous than the others who God found favor with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's interesting about that, that now that you point that out, um, it gets me thinking of a lot of other texts that were written around the second century. I don't think this one was written in the second century BC. Let's be clear here. I think this was written a little bit before, but there was there seemed to be a tradition, you could call it, that they had noticed that those early patriarchs were kind of dicks, and a lot of the time authors, like in the Wisdom of Ben Sira, I believe, Ben Sira does try to distance himself from those patriarchs. He makes it clear that there is a link between them and the people, but morally he does try to distance himself. And that wasn't even the first time, I don't think. There have been other times as well where authors of the period would distance themselves from how the patriarchs acted because they had kind of, fallen out of favor in a sense, not out of favor with, with God, but at least with the people themselves. That seems to be a thing that happened over time. So now that you point that out, yeah, that would also make sense with this being a slightly later story.
Oh, cool. I did see a comment about uh, this cursed woman. I did actually also want to mention that there is also like why is he saying cursed after already blessed, saying that she was doing something for the divine good, and the explanation is like the word cursed is not necessarily used to mean wicked because it's used for like um it's kind of saying this person is cursed to be a slave or something like that. So she was cursed in the sense that she was a slave to her astrology, and and her interpretation of it. Um, so not that she was a wicked person. She was, the Bible puts, according to this interpretation, the Bible puts her next to the story of Tamar to say that she was a righteous person. And I think the lesson you're supposed to learn is like, don't judge a book by its cover.
There
Something
seems
like
to
that.
be a lot of like stories in the Bible where there's a whore, or someone who's like morally loose as a woman, and that's a lesson for everybody about being a whore. you know, like Samson and Delilah, I guess, and
I've got a couple more
Bathsheba.
comments.
Yeah.
Got a couple more comments I got to read. Kicker White Lion offers 20 Czech kroner. Says, "This book makes me sad. Can we read The Lord of the Rings instead?" Anton Gomez says, "Differences in the Quran. The baker and wine bearer details are absent. The dreams are incomplete or absent. And Joseph is believed innocent but goes to jail anyway. And women cut themselves because of Joseph." And then
Yeah.
and then Minute Rice, $5 offers, and it came to pass that Joseph prophesied that Joseph Smith, oh wait, wrong book, lol. Anton Gomez adds, Muhammad screwed up and added Joseph's mom at the ending, who was dead. And Jacob's blindness is cured by Joseph's magic powers. I can't remember the other differences. I couldn't either. Yeah, so Anton, don't worry about that.
I
And
love how
then
the Quran like skips out bits from the Bible
No, that's
itself, but then adds
yeah,
things from like Midrash. So
Mm.
it's very interesting to see like which communities they got their traditions from.
indeed.
Nestorians possibly. Uh,
All right, so what verse are we on?
I think we're at 9.
Okay.
9.
So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it was budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." This is what it means, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are the 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well for you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put into a dungeon.
So first about verse 13, Pharaoh will lift up your head. Targum Jonathan renders this phrase as Pharaoh will remember you. Uh, Rashi comments that the word for lift your head, nasarosh in Hebrew, denotes to count, as in Exodus 30:12. And so, when he musters his other servants to wait upon him during the meal, he will count the cupbearer among them.
Yeah, it seems that there was a double meaning here. So you'd have the meaning of like pointing somebody out or singling them out, and you would also, yeah, it means to single out as in a census, to invite, to grant favor or extended reconciliation, as when a monarch lifts up with a gesture the downcast head of a contrite subject. When Joseph addresses the baker in, and we're going to get to this, but when Joseph addresses the baker in verse 19, he begins as though he were using the idiom in the same positive sense as here, but by adding from upon you, he turns it into a reference to beheading, the first such reference in the Bible. So, yeah, in verse 20, when both courtiers are the object of the idiom, it is used in the neutral sense of to single out. So there are two senses here to note about that phrase.
Yeah. And about verse 15, the land of the Hebrews. So, according to Anson Reini, who was a professor emeritus of ancient Near Eastern cultures and Semitic linguistics at Tel Aviv University, some compare the Hebrews with the Afiru and Habiru that are known from 2nd millennium BCE inscriptions. However, there's not enough basis for this comparison. In those days, the Habiru were outside of organized society. Most scholars think that they were refugees without any ethnic or tribal relations who escaped their masters. When Joseph finds his land of origin, he wants to make it clear that he came from Canaan, where the Hebrews settle, as the Egyptians know it. Most scholars also think that this is an anachronistic phrase and has a hint of the historical reality after the Israelite settlement.
Yeah, so about the Hapiru, I should have grabbed a book on this or something. But yes, for a long time they were believed to be the ancestors of the Israelites, and I think that there are still some scholars today that follow that, but most don't. And I think that was noted by Romer, I believe, in his Invention of God, which is a very good book that I recommend. And there have been other scholars that have commented on it as well. I believe in this book, actually, there are quite a few references to them as being like possible candidates for the earliest Israelites. But it does seem like they were nomadic and not actually. They're the best link would be like the name. You have like Hapiru and then Hebrew. Like it's a etymological link really that they're trying to draw there, but it's likely that that was not actually the case. They just kind of sound similar.
I was reading like kind of a Christian answer to the Skeptics Annotated Bible on this chapter, and of course it's a bit of a stretch. They interpreted. I don't know how many Christians do this though. The baker and the cupbearer as like kind of prefiguring the Eucharist, the bread and the wine during the Lord's Supper.
Of
This
course.
sounds like a bit of a stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why this would be like I see how they're getting there, but it's like why would the Eucharist be talking about this story?
Yeah.
I see that they search for like prophecies about Jesus in the Hebrew Bible, so maybe it relates to this.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Oh,
as
yeah,
much as
definitely.
a stretch as a meme that I saw that said, I like Jesus because, like, he's my favorite bottom because he likes bread and to be wined or something like that.
Who's my favorite bottom?
Well, whatever, submissive.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Okay.
because he likes to be bread and be wine or something like that.
That's actually
Bread,
bread.
BRED, and wine, WHINE.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, okay. I get it now.
So, someone in the
Great.
comments said that without Lilith, we haven't had enough dirty jokes. So that's
I was
why,
just going to
There
mention
you
that. Okay, so if anybody else want to take over and finish this chapter? All right, I'll do it. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a
Mine.
favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. This is what it means, Joseph said. 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Now, the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that once again he could put a cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him.
So, verse 16 here, the baskets of bread, the Hebrew word for it is salei chori. JPS translates it to
Bless you.
open work.
Sorry.
The JPS translates it to open work baskets. Some commentators like Saadia Gaon, Ibn Ezra, and Nachmanides, and Targum Jonathan understood chori to be a kind of white bread, as chori could derive from chiver, which means pale. However, this interpretation is problematic because the next verse describes the content of the basket.
You know,
You got
I
another-
do. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
No, you please.
So I wanted to note here on Genesis 40, on Genesis 40, 20 through 22. So we have that inclusion about the Pharaoh's birthday, right? So on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday. Now this may seem kind of innocuous. However, as is noted, the conclusion of the narration about Joseph's interpretation of the dreams of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker finds its fulfillment at the occasion of the king's birthday. As pointed out by Redford, the celebration of Pharaoh's birthday is not attested before the Ptolemaic period. The Rosetta Stone, 197 BCE, mentions the birthday of Ptolemy V, which is related to an amnesty. Quote, whereas those who were in prison and those who were under accusation for a long time, he has freed of the charges against them, in addition to the killing of impious people. If one does not want to relate verse 20 to the Ptolemaic period, one would need to view the anniversary as the anniversary of the king's ascent to the throne. But this theory is not very plausible because of the specific Hebrew term that is used. One could, however, imagine that the mention of the birthday is a later insertion in the original story. It is also noteworthy that hanging is not used as a death penalty in ancient Egypt. The current method of this rare practice was impalement. Does this mean that the author was not aware of Egyptian practices, or does he write in a time where hanging has become more popular? And this is, once again, we have references to Esther, of course, with the hanging of Haman. So
Where's the ratchet, sorry. The Purim, when you say Haman, then you use the ratchet.
Boo.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. He should not
No,
be
it's
mad at
only
me.
you only need to do it if you say Haman the evil one or something like that.
Oh,
Then
okay.
you-
I remember
you
that.
can
I remember
always-
that you did that every time you said Haman.
Oh, maybe that's different communities do it differently.
Maybe.
Maybe it's an Ashkenazi thing only to do it.
Wait,
when-
what? Jews disagreeing with each other? Oh my God, what is this?
I think it was like the synagogue leaders were like, "There's too much noise. Only do it when there's an epithet next to his name."
So verse 20 about Pharaoh's birthday. So several commentators like Rashi and Gersonides write that this was his birthday. Bachir ben Asher comments that this was a day of his son's birth. In those days, kings used to celebrate their birthdays with feasts and grand celebrations. For example, Herodotus in his Histories, Book 1, Section 113, and Book 9, Section 110, writes that the Persian kings used to have lavish feasts in their birthdays and gave gifts for the people. Also, the Rosetta Stone describes festivals for the king's birthday.
Yeah, so I did mention the Rosetta Stone one. So the mention of the Persian king there wouldn't really matter for Egyptian culture until far later, of course. So that would be another hint at a Persian or Hellenistic time period, I think, because in Egypt they didn't do that. Was
I
kind of
mean,
the point.
there was a good comment by someone, and I didn't see who it was, but it says, "Do gods have birthdays?" And Egypt, the pharaohs were treated like gods, so it wouldn't make why would it make sense to have a birthday?
Good point. It was just the time that they got their human form. That's it.
I got another couple comments to read. Too young to feel this old offers $5 and said, Aaron saw and liked my tweet from last night, and I got so excited. What you do is so important, and I'm a huge fan. Thank you very much for that. And then Zachary Loner offers $10 and says, I want a musical rendition. Go, 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 Joseph. You know what they say. Come now, Joseph. You'll make it someday. Shalala, Joseph. You're doing fine. You and your dreams are ahead of your time. Okay. And somebody else was commenting about the differences between the Bible and the cartoon version, which the Bible, the cartoon, and the Quran. There's all equally credible. And then Trevor Wright offers or says, why are there hardly any scholarly sources about the Near East on how they interacted in different geographical locations between complex civilizations?
I'm not sure what the scholarly sources you've been looking for, but there's like a whole bunch of them.
I was thinking that I've seen, well, like my favorite bits that I've seen is like the little personal letters, from a wife to a husband who's traveling merchant kind of thing, and they're talking about how they're out of grain or whatever, totally domestic stuff from 2,500 years ago.
Yeah, that. So I think, I think the question was more geared towards why this hasn't been a thing in scholarly literature, although it totally has been. So recently, this is from Blackwell Publishing, I think, or I think the author was named it's Blackwell Publishing. I forget the name of the author, but they have this series. You can probably look it up on Amazon. So they have ones on the history of Babylon, the history of the ancient Near East, stuff like that, and they go into it pretty in depth for considering how long the actual history of those places actually is. They put it very nicely. They don't give you too many details where it's just the little stuff nobody really cares about, and they don't like dumb it down enough to where you don't actually learn anything. So it's a very good series of books that they have there. I'd recommend that.
And about verses 21 and 22. Remember how the Talk of Jonathan said that they tried to take counsel against the king. So Talk of Jonathan again writes that he restored the cupbearer because he found that he had not been in that council, but hanged the baker because he had taken counsel to kill him. So karma. And
I
she,
think
yeah.
that just reminded me of. I'm sure this was something I learned in school, but I don't know where it comes from. But it was, at the beginning, Rashi says it was a fly in the cup and a stone in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
bread.
I've said so.
And so I'm sure I was taught, at least in school, that the reason why one was hanged and one was kept is that if a fly landing in the cup is not the fault of the
Yeah,
server,
yeah. I think
but a
Hiskuni
stone in
said this.
the bread. Ah, yeah,
I think Hiskuni said this. Yeah.
yeah. But the stone in the bread is a sign of someone who didn't mill the flour properly or whatever.
Yeah. And verse 23. According to Bereshit Rabbah 88:7, he wished to remember and determined to tell Pharaoh, but an angel drove the idea out of his head. Talcum Jonathan, however, writes, because Joseph had withdrawn from the mercy that is above and had put his confidence in the chief butler, he waited on the flesh. Therefore, the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him, until from the Lord came the time of the end that he should be released.
Yeah. And I think it says it's 2 years later, so you could say that 2 years plus a few days is 3 years, and so the three in the dreams wasn't really 3 days; it was actually 3 years. And Joseph saying 3 days was him being very optimistic,
Hmm.
or something like that. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
So we moving on to 41.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh wow.
When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream, and he was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the river bank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again, and he had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. Comment yet? Nope.
Yeah.
Okay.
First,
Okay.
I have one. First about the Nile. So in the Hebrew Bible, the word is Yeol. The Nile was called Hapi or Iteru in ancient Egyptian, and later the T was removed, such that in Coptic Sahidic it will be Eyu. In Assyrian, it's also Ayul. And the cows. So, according to Professor Rafael Givion, who was an Egyptologist and a professor of archaeology at Tel Aviv University, cattle were important for Egyptian economics. Cattle were used as working animals and provided milk and meat. Egyptians used them as religious symbols. For example, Nut, the goddess of the sky, was often described as a cow standing on its 4 legs, giving birth to the sun and the moon in the morning and swallowing them in the evening. Also, Hathor, one of the major Egyptian gods, was often depicted as a cow. In the tomb of Nefertari, who died around 1255 BC, there's a depiction of 7 holy cows and 1 holy bull, symbolizing 8 cardinal directions.
That is definitely interesting.
I think
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just say the verse 1 about the name of the river. I think Rashi says that the word used in Hebrew anyway, it literally means canal, and it's used for the Nile as a descriptor. Is it rather than the name of the river? It's like this river that had lots of canals on it.
On that, Alter points out that that's actually one of the Egyptian loan words in the Hebrew narrative. So there would be the word for Nile, soothsayers, rushes, ring, and fine linen. Those would be the Egyptian loan words.
Yeah, I've already commented that in ancient Egyptian it was Iteru or Hapi, and then later on the T was omitted.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Okay. Well, what verse were we up to?
I think we are in
8.
6.
Yes, 8. In the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. I got to comment that, okay, he has this dream and then he wakes up. And why does he wake up? He wakes up so that you can separate one dream from another. It's storytelling, and that's all this is. It's alarming to me that, and I understand that people get through that they went through a stage like this where they think that dreams mean something. If dreams were the way that a god talks to you, then your god is confused. Then the chief cupbearer
Wait,
said to
I
Pharaoh,
wanted to
"Yeah,
comment
go
on
ahead."
verse 8 about the magicians and wise men. So the word is used is Khartoumim. Khartoumei, the wise men of Egypt, it's Khartoumei Mitzrayim. This probably originates from late Egyptian Cheritep, which was a general term for magician or lector priest.
Yep, that's one of the Egyptian loan words. Yep.
Mhm.
Then the
And
chief
no one, I'm sorry, Aaron. And no one could interpret them for him. According to Bereshit Rabbah 89:6, Rabbi Joshua of Siknin said in Rabbi Levi's name, There were indeed interpreters of the dream, but their interpretations were unacceptable to him. For example, the 7 good cows mean that you will beget 7 daughters. The 7 ill-favored cows that you will bury 7 daughters. The 7 full ears of corn that you will conquer 7 provinces. The 7 thin ears that 7 provinces will revolt against you. That's it.
Then the cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. The Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me, and the chief baker in the house, and the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream, and things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled." So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said,
So
"Yes?"
yeah, sorry. About verse 12, a young Hebrew servant of the chief of the guard. So Rashi comments that this phrase is spoken in a disparaging language. He writes, "Young, unwise, and unfitted for a high position, a Hebrew who does not even know our language, a slave, and it is written in the laws of Egypt that a slave may neither become a ruler nor dress in princely robes." And verse
Okay.
14, about
Mhm.
he had shaved. Rashi comments that the shaving was out of respect for the king. And according to Baruch Brandel, who is the archives and library director at Israel Antiquities Authority, during the New Kingdom period, priests would shave off all of their hair, including body hair, out of purity.
I do actually have something on that, on both the shaving and changing of his clothes. So the two verbal forms used here indicate that this happened on Joseph's own initiative. He was careful to appear before Pharaoh in a way likely to find his favor. Note that shaving is not associated with cleanliness or appropriateness. In graphic representations of the ancient Near East, male Semites are regularly displayed as bearded. As bearded, Egyptians as clean shaven. So he's trying to identify more with an Egyptian, interestingly. So this is one of the details that show, quote, the storyteller's positive evaluation of Joseph's full integration into Egyptian society. Another relevant detail is Joseph's new name. So once we get
Later on,
there,
we'll see
yeah,
this.
in verse 45, I'm going to have quite a bit to say when we get there. So
I think
I
I
mean,
also.
yeah, makes sense.
yeah, just to say, like, it's not just a tradition at that time. Semites would have beards, but the Bible also forbids shaving to a certain amount, and religious Jews to this day, depending on how religious you are, either don't shave at all or don't shave completely. So their interpretation of this is he cut his hair.
Yeah.
Pharaoh, yep.
Yeah. No,
Anyone was in?
he's
Okay, go ahead.
yeah. Yegalach could mean either to shave the beard or to shave the hair.
Hmm.
Shave. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So continuing on, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph said to Pharaoh, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so, so they looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to magicians, but none of them could explain it to me." Maybe they were trying to figure out how pieces of grain could eat other pieces of grain.
Yeah.
Then, and how does a cow eat a whole other cow?
Opens its
And
mouth.
Like a snake, just
Yeah.
Remember, this was before Aaron. This is before evolution was invented. Remember that.
It was.
Okay.
I'm sure the vision was psychedelic enough
And
to
just
get
the
the meaning, but
ugliest
it would be
cows the
cool.
Pharaoh had ever seen.
Yeah,
Ugly,
like
ugly
that.
cows. I've never seen cows that ugly. Yeah, so weird.
Yeah, just go on about it for a while.
Ah,
And then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do, because God is the confused. God is the word or the Lord acts in delirious ways. He cannot communicate anything sensibly. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind, they are 7 years of famine." Did I read that right?
Yes, you
Never
did.
mind. Okay.
You did.
It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh that he is what he's about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance of Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance of the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is because the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. So, God knows everything that's going to happen before it happens. Therefore, we don't have free will. But his own will is an issue there, because he doesn't know if he knows that that's what's going to happen, because he hasn't decided yet.
Tomo, do you have the commentary for the forgetting and the?
What about the cupbearer?
Does nobody remember that Egypt was? I just want to know that the prophecy here failed. Right? We all aware that Egypt was a great prosperous place once upon a time. That wasn't forgotten. That prophecy failed.
So
No,
this is where we get into kind of muddled waters here, or muddy waters here. So when it comes to, so it obviously succeeds in the story, right? And the only time period that we could place it where it was because if this was written as an ex eventu prophecy kind of thing, then which means it was a prophecy written after, in this case, after a famine. It was a prophecy written after the fact, but kind of dated to before it happened. So that's what an ex eventu prophecy is. So I noted this earlier when we first started the Joseph story, but the famine stela, for example, is probably our closest kind of bet here. So in the famine stela, there are 7 years of famine. Yeah, it says so. 7 years of famine have exhausted the land. Hapi has failed to come in time in a period of 7 years. There's the same kind of mention of grain. There's the same dream revelation, except the deity and the mediator are different. And this takes place in the when was it, around the year 400, I think, BCE. I think that's around when it comes from. So this would be the best place to put it if we're trying to find a historical link there.
If there just had to be an historic correlation, that's the only place it could be. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, completely the wrong time period, right?
Well, it wouldn't be. Yeah, it wouldn't be the one that what it would speak to is time of authorship, more than time of narrative placement.
Ivory Darkness says, weren't there more than just 2 visions Pharaoh had? Weren't there more? I think, didn't we just?
No.
So there were two by Pharaoh, but the other 2 were the servants of Pharaoh. So
Yeah, that's right. That's why I'm getting confused about it. And then Jessa says, does the specific number 7 mean anything for anyone on the panel? I mean, I hear you, because 7 shows up way too much.
Yeah, 7 is a typological number. It has a very special significance. For example, the 7 days that the world was created, the Shemitah, the falling of Jericho, and Other typological numbers include 40 and 12, 10. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
7 is a
I think
typological number.
The importance
it's
is
also
completeness.
completeness, and I think also in Jewish mysticism, it can be thought of as like the number of nature, and because the 7 days of the week and 7 days of creation,
Yeah,
and
yeah, kind of the
and
Ouroboros there, kind of
and
snaking
if you
his own
use the
tail.
number 8, it's kind of implying miracle because it's beyond nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
So they would use the common construction of like in this case it would be 7 and then 7 plus 1, so then 7 and then 8, which which is not only completeness but like even further than completeness. So completing completion uh, is kind of the idea there, and that definitely popped up for me a lot when I was reading over the suffering servant material. Interestingly,
Yeah, the vision, these two dreams, right? You got the 7 years and the 7 years, but the also the bit where they swallow, where the thin ones swallow the fat ones, and then you still couldn't. They didn't grow. They were still thin. This is implied by the later verse we just read, which were the people forgot how nice it was to live in years of plenty because of how bad the famine was, and that's the that's supposed to be the it's supposed
Someone
to be because of that
commented.
bit of the dream.
Sorry about that. Someone commented like the 7 houses of dwarfs. Oh wait, I'm thinking of much better literature. Yeah, and 7 and 3 are numbers that pop up in literature a lot.
and
Too.
40.
And
3 elves for the three rings for the elves. 7, is it 7 for men?
are we talking about Lord of the Rings too?
Yeah.
but and then I don't know why 9 isn't more a
9
magic
is.
number because
Because it's 3 times 3.
yeah,
Maybe I think that maybe 9 wasn't an actual number somehow. Like it wasn't. They weren't revolving in base 10. I believe they were revolving in other bases, like
yeah.
base 60 in the Babylonian.
But look at 9. Every multiple
Oh,
of 9 adds up to 9.
At base 10.
Oh, okay. There you go. 27 is 3 times 9. Add 2 to 7 is 9. 36 is 9 times 4. 3 plus 6 is 9. And I keep thinking of number 9 on the Beatles record. But when I'm doing this, and then the Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings. Look at the Fellowship. We have a complete fellowship. It's 9.
Yeah.
And 9 rings for men who desire power. Anyway,
Yeah,
Trevor and
someone
Wright
quoted
says,
that. So here's the quote: 3 rings for elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in the halls of stone, 9 rings for mortal men doomed to die, 1 ring for the dark lord on his dark.
Okay.
Got away from me on his dark whatever.
that earlier comment got their wish because now we're reading The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So, Trevor and Wright says, what
infinitely
is the
more interesting.
etymology of the word Elohim, and did that name originate from the Canaanites?
Oh, I forgot. I know that
mean-
Elohim is the plural word for Eloha, I guess.
yeah.
Which means both hello and
It
goodbye?
means God. Like
Ah.
El means God, and it was also the name of the chief god of the Canaanites. And the
Yeah.
Elohim would have just been his children and the gods.
Yeah, it would have been the
but-
gods. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
So this
Elohar
is
another expression. Yeah.
this is essentially how it happened. So a very long time ago, the Canaanites had El, and then all the other gods were Elohim. They were simply gods. Then the Yahweh religion came along, and slowly it kind of subverted and took over all of the El and Elohim imagery and language over time. And eventually, El and Elohim became just generic words for God. That's essentially how that happened. But yes, it was Canaanite.
But sometimes it means angels.
Well, we will get to that. There's a fascinating passage in, I think is it in was it in Second Samuel, I think. Where's the Witch of Endor? What book is that in? So this is a very real biblical
Lord of
story.
the Rings. Now we're going
Yeah,
into Star
the
Wars.
This is very this is a very serious biblical story actually. So
where Samuel is brought from the I think it was Sheol, like the
yeah,
that he came to Saul asked the spirit of Samuel. Yeah, I remember this story.
yeah, the word that's used there to describe what is coming out of the earth was Elohim. The word used to describe Samuel was Elohim.
Mm.
So very interesting stuff there, I think.
Yeah, I think there is maybe a couple of places where the word Elohim means like officials or like it's talking about men, people.
Yeah, I
I
think
can't
so.
remember
I don't
where it's
remember
used in
where. Yeah.
that way.
Either way, for more evidence of early polytheism, you should definitely go read Psalm 82, where there is literally a council of gods. So
And also, when we're going to talk about Isaiah, we'll see angels like the seraphim and etc.
Does Elohim mean the host? Like the heavenly
Um,
host?
No, that would be El
Tsevaot, maybe
Tsevaot.
Lord of the
Yeah,
host. Yeah, Adonai Tsevaot.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So multiple, that word is plural, but then it became known as like a kind of another name for the singular God.
yep, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it's another name for God, King of the Host, but I think it's referring. So it could be like from the Henoistic, what's it called? The in between polytheism and
Hedonism, I think, or what hedonism is something
no,
else.
like I think it's henotheistic or
Yeah,
something like that, where you
henotheism is the word you guys are looking for.
Henotheism,
henotheism
yeah.
when you
Hedonism is something
you
completely
worship only one God, but you don't deny the others
Yeah,
exist.
so essentially started off as polytheism, then went to henotheism, and then we get monotheism.
Monotheism.
Yeah.
So there might
someone a comment from Kadziz says Aaron doesn't read fiction, reads the Bible and Quran. Yeah, I have to understand what what the book actually says. Since if we had people who were forming their system of government and imposing the laws detailed in the Lord of the Rings, for example, if there were some work of fiction like that, then I would have to know what the Lord of the Rings said in order to argue against the book believers. But otherwise, why would I? I want to understand the way things are. I don't need to hear any more stories.
Yeah, so I get this a lot because I also don't read fiction. So one of my friends is like, "But you read like the Bible a lot," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's fair." So the way I see it is that the Bible is composed of so many literary genres, and it's more proper to view it as a whole as mythology, which I do have it's not purely fiction. Like if we think about fiction in a modern sense, mythology is distinct from fiction. Myth is written much differently for much different purposes, and fiction just doesn't have that same kind of weight to it, whether it be moral or even in this case, even in some cases historical references. This is more people trying to understand the world that they're living in more than they're simply just making something up for the hell of it. So this was actually came up in my Greek mythology course. We were told to define mythology, and I gave like this long, like probably the most scholarly answer I've given to a question like that. And everyone else has like, oh, it's just a story, or it's something that can't be proved. And I'm like, first of all, those you guys are horrible at definitions. So, like those are so fucking vague. So I think that in the most critical context you can have it, there is a clear difference between mythology and fiction. So a lot of people give me like, oh, that's just a copium answer, and I'm like, I mean, sure, maybe a little bit, but I still view them as being different enough.
Okay, so a comment from Kicker White Lion, another $50 50 kroner, says Kicker Gray Lion. Yes, they used to call me that. I am Kicker White Lion, and I come to you at the turn of the tide. Just had to do it.
So we are in verse 33, I guess.
Yes.
What about
No.
not
Well,
32?
yes.
Before we
Yes.
move on, I had something to comment about fiction and fiction. A lot of times is like synonymous with not true, lie. That's fictional. But there are some truths in fiction. When I used to teach literature to middle schoolers, sometimes they would watch. I don't know. It's pretty old now. The Storyteller by Jim Henson, and the intro like is when people told themselves their past with stories, explained their present with stories, and foretold the future with stories. The best place at the fire was kept for the storyteller. So these stories like Joseph, they didn't have TV, internet, and they had a fire at night, and they had the stars to look at to entertain themselves and make life less dreary. And so these stories do hold some truths in them, but they're very obscured by being mixed with other stories, especially in the Bible. And you can't really tell what is actually happened in history, like if this Joseph person actually existed and such, because like Lawrence was saying, it's the story is pieces from other stories.
Yeah, actually, I want to do that as a. I mentioned this in the Discord, which, by the way, everyone should join my new Discord.
Yes.
You can go find a link to that in my recent live stream. So, anyways, the I actually brought this up in there. I want to do a video on like the search for the historical Joseph, where I will go over like basically all the Joseph scholarship and see what conclusions I come to. I think that'd be very interesting because through the second reading of the Joseph story, uh, along with all the scholarship that has been noted, I am very much intrigued by this narrative. So I think that doing a deep dive into that would be kind of cool. I did one on the search for the golden calf, so I'm very excited to get into the golden calf story once we get there in Exodus. And I did a video on that one as well. But I think it'd be interesting to cover.
And I think there's some argument that is sometimes not very convincing from Christians that these aren't literal stories. I mean, I'm not talking about the literalist Christians, but like other Christians who say that they're metaphor, it's a metaphor, and that's often used in a dismissive way that doesn't really address the problems with the stories. But maybe some of the ancients told these stories to in a metaphorical way to find some deeper truth, like the Garden of Eden was the end of innocence. When they had knowledge. Before that, they were children. There's sometimes like deeper meaning that is like metaphorical or symbolic, not. But I'm not sure that this Joseph story is doing anything like that though. But on that topic,
Yeah,
The
as they
distinction between
go ahead.
so I just want to say like the distinction between fiction and non-fiction or history and mythology is more modern, and in ancient times those distinctions were a bit more blurred.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like even Greek historians would tell the stories of the gods and stuff like that. So
Yeah, true.
it's yeah.
And I can see making cultural references. I mean, constantly, people tell me that my activism against creationism as an effort of Sisyphus, for example, right? And nobody believes that Sisyphus is real. We all understand the story. It's common. We understand the point being made. It's just like using words in a commonly understood language where we use of that word, we know what the other person means. All right, shall we continue?
Of course, though,
Yeah,
it's not similar to Sisyphus. Oh, never mind.
verse
I think
33.
we're on 32. No,
I
'Cause it
think
explains the
Aaron read verse
duplication.
32. I think
okay.
Aaron read verse 32.
I don't know,
We
but
are
I
verse
will.
I think it's
The
30.
reason the dream was given to Pharaoh is in two forms. As the matter, yes, I had been. But
Okay.
the matter had firmly been decided by God. So God decides what's going to happen before it happens. He accounts for every interaction of every pair of people in all of their communities everywhere. That things are going to go exactly the way that He decides they're going to go. So it doesn't matter what we do. We have no effect on His plan. We therefore do not have free will. why then he needs us to do his work is totally confusing. But anyway, and now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man to put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so the country may not be ruined by the famine. And this just contradicts the whole prophecy, does it? I mean, because it said this is going to happen, but now we're going to be prepared for it, so we won't fall into the state that was prophesied,
Yeah.
so that we can avoid that ultimate calamity. And then in 37, the
Yeah.
plans. Yes.
Before you start, I want to mention about the take fifth of the harvest. So the word is translated as to take fifth in Hebrew is chamesh. Most commentators, like Ibn Ezra, Rashba, and David Kimchi, interpret it to take a fifth of the harvest, as the word probably derives from the Hebrew word for five. Chamesh is five. Rashi, however, based on Targum Onkelos and Exodus 13:18, interprets it to mean, and they shall prepare. The JPS translates it as organize the land.
Okay, so somebody in the comments, Trevor and Wright said, "Who influenced and changed the Bible, and why did they do it?" If we were to answer that question fully,
that's a
that would
loaded
also
question.
that would take another 25 years.
Yeah, that many people have influenced it. Like it.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for its changing.
And a
So,
lot of different ones for different people in different places. I mean, just the
there's it's simply too nuanced of a subject to kind of go.
Yeah, it's the biggest question. Shut up, dog! Damn it, I can't say anything.
The answer is people.
All right,
God.
somebody else read. I don't think that I will be allowed to.
Okay, I'll read. Did you hear me? Hello?
I mean, I
Yeah,
heard.
Yes, I
he
can hear
nodded.
you.
He nodded.
Oh, okay. And we're on 37, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the thing was good in the eyes of the Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, For as much as God hath shewed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain upon his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, Bow the knee! And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said, go ahead.
So I want to comment about the bound. You said bound the knee. I think the NIV says make way, but in the Hebrew Bible it reads avrech or avrek. I think avrech is more. No, the avrech. So avrech. Klein Dictionary read. The word is of uncertain origin and meaning. Some scholars propose various Egyptian derivations. Others see in it a Semitic word. Several Jewish commentators of the Bible, like Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and Sfono, regard avrech as a verb denominated from berech, knee, so that avrech would be a command to those present to bend the knee. Friedrich Delitzsch derives avrech from Akkadian abaraku, denoting a dignitary. And today, avrech is used in the yeshiva world to denote a person who dedicates most of his day to study the Torah. Right, Isaac?
Isaac?
Yeah, it's a common word to be like a married adult who comes back to yeshiva to study after work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did have one thing to note here. So if it's possible, if we can pull up a picture of something, is that a thing we can do here? I should have prepared this beforehand. That's my fault.
If you send it to me, I can pull it up.
Okay, what I can do here is I can drop a link, actually, if that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, drop a link in the chat. Peter can
Okay,
get it.
so when it mentions this golden collar, I just dropped the link there. So and Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and had him clothed in fine linen clothes and placed the golden collar around his neck. So this golden collar, although English translations have repeatedly rendered this as chain, Egyptian bas reliefs show a more elaborate ceremonial ornament made out of twisted gold wire that covered part of the shoulders and upper chest as well as the neck. So this is where I'm not entirely sure here. So the picture that I just sent over, this is called I think it's an usek collar, an ushek collar. This was a very common Egyptian garment. Now, it could have been in like a multitude of colors. So I don't really know if this is referencing a some other golden collar or one of these golden collars, because these were found on sarcophagus of both pharaohs and like lay people who just had enough money to kind of put one on there. So this was a very common ornament for people. This was very common clothing that symbolized not royalty necessarily, but wealth. So this was my first thought when reading it. And these were, of course, they could be many colors, but a golden one would make sense if it was like this to me. So that's just my own personal thought on it.
I would say that the word for the chain is levid, and it only appears in Genesis 41:40, this verse, and in Ezekiel 16:11. And Klein Dictionary writes that it's probably so called in allusion to the links of the necklace laid upon one another, because ravad is to lay, or ravad I think is the to lay. So maybe, yeah. We are in verse.
Or it could be a row.
We're in verse 44.
44.
I'm reading the King James Bible because that's what we read as Southern Baptists, you know, give you that old time religion. It's good enough for me. Okay. And it's different. Y'all are
But that's not what he said. He clearly said to blathe, which means to bluff. So you were probably playing poker and he cheated.
okay.
Sorry.
I know that the panel probably knows the reason why the NIV are better translations than the King James. But on to the story. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zapanathapania. Dang it. I need help, Tomer.
Good try. Tzafenat pa'anecha.
Zafanat
Yeah, just say that.
It's isn't it just paneach?
Pa'aneach.
Tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the nikud here is a bit weird. Tzafenat pa'aneach.
Yeah.
Zapanathapania. And he gave him to wife Asenath,
Asenath.
Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of the Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt.
Yeah,
And
so
the story pauses there, so go ahead.
there's quite a bit here for example, the renaming conventions. And I did just want to note before we got too far off here. So I'm sure everyone has already noticed, I've kind of hinted at this earlier, that the depiction of the Pharaoh in a book like Exodus is very different than the depiction here. Of course, this is uniquely positive in this text. So yeah, he listens to the Hebrew prisoner Joseph, makes him his second in command, gives him a wife of high standing, gives him authority. So a whole bunch of stuff that just makes him kind of look good in those eyes. So this again kind of adds to the Egyptian nature of this text, or speaking to a probably an Egyptian setting would make sense here. So, but it would be far earlier, or sorry, far later than the story. But yeah, the renaming here. So yeah, 4145 is one of only a few verses in the entire Joseph story where Egyptian individuals are named. Here we learn the name of Joseph's new wife, the name of her father, and the new name of Joseph. It is a turning point in Joseph's life. So surprisingly, Joseph's new name is never used again, even after renaming Joseph. Pharaoh will say to all of Egypt, "Go to Joseph, whatever he tells you, do it." In Pharaoh's house, the name Joseph will be used. And when Pharaoh again meets Jacob's son, Joseph is the only name mentioned. Pharaoh's new name for Joseph has no literary effect whatsoever on this character's designation. Readers are left unsure about how they should interpret Joseph's new name. This contrasts the patriarchal history where each of the 12 sons of Jacob, including the name of Joseph, is translated or interpreted when their births are related. Obviously, the narrator did not deem it important to tell his Hebrew readers how he intended them to understand the presumably Egyptian phrase. Otherwise, the narrator would have provided this information. To fill this lack of information, many have tried to explain what Joseph's new name means, both in antiquity and since the beginning of Egyptological studies in the 19th
Mhm.
century. So there seems to I think the author here goes over quite a few
Yeah.
possibilities here.
I
But
have
yeah,
as well.
go ahead, man.
So the Aramaic translations, Josephus, and several Jewish commentators like Rashi, Nachmanides, and Bachir ben Asher understood it to mean explainer or discoverer of mysteries. The precise etymology of the name is unclear. Some Egyptologists accept that the second name may contain the word nach, which means life. And Klein Dictionary writes that, s- uh, according to the Egyptologists, Tzafenath means foodman and Paneach of the life. But from what I've read, it's not that. So
My favorite superhero, Food Man.
Whenever Tomer goes off in his native tongue, I swear this is what I hear. Anarnathra
Oh my
uthvaspitud
god.
dokerdiende.
I don't know if I
Yeah,
should be flattered or not.
I don't know.
Thanks.
I wonder if the I guess Ashkenazi pronunciation of the name Sofnat Paneach is easier for Europeans to say, but possibly not.
Okay.
And
Shall
about
we continue?
no, I have about Asenat and about the
No,
rest
we
of the
shall
name.
not continue.
And it came to pass. Not continue.
No, and it shall not come to pass.
Oh, that's true.
and I, Aaron, shall. No, I forgot how it works. Okay. So Asenat.
Sorry, Tomer. One last note about this new name before we get into this other name. So the Egyptian, the name may mean God speaks, he lives, as Moshe Weinfeld, following the lead of Egyptologists, surmises.
Shea Weinfeld. Yeah, I have his book on Genesis. Okay.
Is it possible that the Hebrew writers knew enough Egyptian to give him a name that meant something?
Yeah, absolutely.
meaningful?
If this was written in Egypt, as seems pretty likely at this point. Yeah, if this is written in Egypt and about the 4th or hell maybe even 3rd centuries BCE, yeah, I could totally see that.
Okay, so it's not a post-exilic interpretation.
Well,
Okay.
it is post-exilic, but it's not like directly after the exile.
Right, because there was a period, wasn't there, with Egyptians.
So Asenat, according to the BDB dictionary, the name derives from the Egyptian belonging to Nath, who was an Egyptian goddess. Potiphar, according to the Talmud, Sotah 13b, this is Potiphar. Some Jewish commentators like Rashi, Gersonides, and Chizkuni agree with this interpretation. However, others like Rashbam do not. And On, identified as Ayunu in Egyptian. According to BDB dictionary, it was celebrated for worship of the sun god, Ra. Hence, it was called Sun City or Heliopolis in Greek.
Okay.
Is there an explanation by the ones who say that they are the same people why he has a different title?
I actually don't know. Let me check. Maybe because the same name, it derives from the Talmud.
Yeah. I'm saying like they identify Potiphar as Potiphar, but if Potiphar was the head executioner, whatever, how come now he's being called priest of?
Yeah, it reads initially it is written Potiphar, and in the end it is written Potiphera. The change in his name indicates that a part of himself was mutilated. That is the
Yeah,
the
that's what I
addition of
brought up, didn't I?
Steinsaltz. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
So Alter, so this is the full form of the same name borne by Joseph's old master Potiphar, but evidently refers to a different person, since Potiphar was identified as a courtier and high chamberlain, not as priest. On is not a deity, but the name of a city, later designated Heliopolis, which you noted. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I would quote the I will quote the full text in Sotah. Rav says he purchased the handsome Joseph for himself for the intended purpose of homosexual intercourse, but was unable to fulfill his desires, as the angel Gabriel came and castrated Potiphar. Then Gabriel came again and further mutilated him in the same part of his body. This is alluded to in the verse that write Potiphar's name differently.
That's hard.
That is,
Yeah.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
say that that this is with additional commentary from Steinsaltz in order to
Speaking
understand
of writing
what the,
someone's name differently, someone comments asking about Aaron Ra. Says, do you use transliterations? I think of Berber or Amazi language or Arabic language of the words you don't know, or Phoenician, Sumerian, Persian, or Akkadian languages. I no.
well, I
I,
mean,
I
the thing is, the many of the names here, or I should say, the names here are in fact transliterations. So whenever we, like, for example, when Tomer or Isaac points out some Hebrew word, we can write them in English scripts, and it's kind of the same thing that's happening with the names here. So I think that sometimes we use transliterations, but not like exclusively.
I don't know about the ancient Persian, but I know modern Arabic and Persian Farsi are very related languages, like kind of like
yeah their
almost
font
like Spanish and French.
yeah their grammar is also very
Mm-hmm.
similar.
I'm sure
Same
Hebrew is more
alphabet.
similar to I
It
mean,
is.
Persian is an Indo-Aryan language, not Semitic, and
but what
Arabic
about
is
to
very similar to
Reformed
Hebrew.
Egyptian?
Yeah, probably quite.
That's a moronic language.
Good one.
So Alu says, I finished your book, Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism, today, and you have cemented my stance as an atheist. I am in a deeply religious family, so it's difficult coming out to them. Thank you very much for that. I live for messages like this, and this is just one example. I mean, as I say that I get maybe an average of one a day, and I have been for like the last 10 years. This is an example. This is my one for today. So thank you for sharing that with me. I feel you having the family situation. I have family that just do not want to be reasoned with. And I've had people have told me I want to believe what I want to believe, and they admit that they don't even care whether it's true or not. That's what they want to believe. Why don't you just shut up and let me believe that?
Yeah, like what you believe is not what I believe, as if they're
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
For me, it was
Oh,
worse.
I gotta share this. I gotta share this. My mother, who has no idea what rational thinking is, actually used this sentence on me. She says, I believe what I believe because that's what I believe. I believe that. I'm not going to believe what you believe because that's not what I believe.
Inarguable.
Yeah, it was worse for me. It was worse coming out as an atheist than it was to come out as gay.
Hmm.
So
Wait,
yeah,
you're an
coming out
atheist?
is oh shit.
All right. I'm sorry. I stepped on your commentary. I shouldn't have.
We ready to go on?
Yes.
Yes. Will you read, dear?
Huh?
Will you read?
I will read it.
Okay.
And it came to pass. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh God. Here
and
we go
in the
again.
And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. The food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God, said he, hath made me forget all of the toil and all of my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim. For God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all
I should say that the word for Menashe in Hebrew
Mhm.
comes from kinashani, which is the made me forget. Made me forget part, and the Ephraim comes from Hephrani. Sorry about that. Hephrani, which means to make me fertile. So that's it.
Okay. So I got to read a couple of other comments real quick. Minute Rice said, Aaron, let me make it 2 messages for today. I've told you this before, but your work gave me a good working understanding of the term atheist and why it applies to me. Thanks again for sharing that. And now, Peter, would you quickly scramble to put up Kicker White Lions comment where he offers 50 Czech kroner? Make Tomer read this as payback for making of your Hebrew. I'm not even going to attempt that.
Making fun of your Hebrew, I'm guessing.
Make it
Yeah.
funny. I mean, no.
What language is that?
I think it's Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, it's the one. Yeah, Ash nazik durbatul,
Tomer,
Ash
I
nazik
gotta
kimpatul,
respect
Ash
that.
nazik thratutul, Ash brozom ishi krimpatul.
Oh shit, Isaac's on a roll.
I'm not
Oh my
really
word!
think
No.
so. Yeah.
I was just about to say
Maybe.
that I loved Tomer's response. No.
Yeah, that's better.
Well, that was brilliant. You read that, I think.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He is familiar with Lord of the Rings. I'm not.
No,
Okay.
it's not that. I think in English we have this like great vowel shift where a lot of our vowels changed, and if you kind of reverse that, you can read most other languages more closely to them than so. You know, if you see an I in a foreign word, it's almost never going to be pronounced I. It's always going to be pronounced I. So if you kind of do that, you can probably read it
And
a
you know
bit
what's
better.
horrible? Greek transliterations. Every time you see a Y in Greek transliterations, it's actually a U because the letter that's used there is an upsilon, which
Yeah.
is literally a U and makes a
Ah,
U sound.
Mhm.
So, like,
Yeah.
why
Even
are
in
they
the name.
why are they exactly? Why are they translating it or transliterating it with a Y? That pisses me off. It's not Kyrios to mean Lord. It's Kurios that means Lord. You
Ah.
Oh my god, that has
I
pissed me
mean,
Isn't
the
that
letter
so much.
Y, the letter Y is, I think it's in French, it's called like Y, like Greek E.
Yeah.
So it's a Greek letter in a sense. So like, why are you using? That's not a good letter to use for transliteration from
No,
Greek.
it's not. It's not. They don't have anything that would be like a Y. They had like diphthongs, which could make a Y sound if it's the right one. But like, no, stop it.
And then a Hive Sigh says, "Hey, R and Raw, looking forward to your upcoming series." And then they put a couple emojis down there. So yeah, spider and scorpion. Well, thank you. I'm currently working on a series for evolution of arachnomorpha. with
Mhm.
one of my taxonomy series that don't get a lot of views because not as many people are interested in science.
They do
But
get a lot of views, but not as many as your creationism owning videos.
yeah, I wish, and I see this a lot when I look at science documentaries. I'll notice how few views there are, but anything with the slightest bit of just emotional drama will just go through the roof. Comparatively. Oh, this is a brilliant documentary. This has
People
such
come for
great
the dumpster
animations and
fire.
such good information that had 45 people look at it. Anyway,
Yeah, I think I feel like
Well,
for your videos.
Aaron, if
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you need motivation to keep doing the science documentaries, your videos are what I use to deconvert my sister from creationism. So
okay, that's my second message for the day.
Yay.
Thank you very much for that. That will certainly keep me going, and I'm looking forward to this one. I'll be as soon as we're done here, I'm going to be editing it.
Yeah,
My
I
very
feel
first episode.
I feel like the ones that you do on taxonomy, I guess, would be kind of more like reference material for very specific questions. So like it's in general, you don't really find people talking about the evolution of snakes in like religious debates. But if that comes up in a debate, then someone could link them to your episode on it.
Yes, it had nothing to do with the snake
now that
losing its legs. In the explanation in the Bible, it was evolution. Evolution did it.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah,
another topic. And
I would say that the reason why.
yes,
Never mind then.
Go ahead.
you go ahead.
I was just gonna say the reason why the creationism videos are more attractive is because lots of people put the raw information out there. I mean, anybody can learn how evolution works and the evidence for it if they want to research that intensely. But what most people are looking for is specifically the information in the context of refuting creationism,
I
which
find
most scientists don't focus on.
I
Yeah.
find evolution to be a more fascinating explanation than any theological or other mythological explanations. It's beautiful and wondrous.
Yeah, and Aaron is like the S tier when it comes to comparing creationist arguments with the actual evidence. Like I can memorize all the actual evidence, but actually being able to put it into a compare and contrast with what creationists say, that's why Aaron's videos are so attractive, is because he's the only one who really does that, and he does it very well.
Thank you very much, but I don't like compliments a lot.
Wow, you just like me.
Kind of like how
No,
vending
I think
machines
you
don't like
love
wrinkly
compliments,
dollar
though.
bills.
Yeah.
I don't. I generally when people say stuff like, "Oh, I'm a genius," because I'm helping students with math, and they're just amazed by my skills. I'm like, no, I just practice a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that because I'm not great at math. I've had to work with a lot of tutors, and when I finally found some old guy that really knew how to explain it in a way that I could understand it, that was a revelation for me. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have passed my calculus. I needed somebody to really be able to explain it to me in a way that tutors in my college were not even allowed to do. I was told that we can help you when you have a problem, but we can't teach it to you. Well, if you're not going to teach it to me, then how am I supposed to learn? I'm taking an online class here.
This is kind of off topic, but and maybe takes too long to explain, but is math part of Jewish mysticism?
I know that there are several Jewish scholars that were very that practiced mathematics, like Ibn Ezra and Gersonides. I think there was one. I don't know if it was Gersonides or somebody else that was. I think he invented the factorial, but I don't quite remember. But when it comes to, I don't really know how much mathematics was influential in Judaism. I know that there are Jewish like rabbis and scholars who were practicing like mathematics, but generally, I see mostly today that like ultra orthodox see mathematics as this like secular or foreign thing to learn, so
Mm.
they don't really study it, and that is also a problem in Israel, that there are like these ultra orthodox that don't learn like English and mathematics, and when like they try to get a job, they have a very hard time because they don't understand mathematics or English.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, my Orthodox primary school, we did do maths, but only until year 8, which is like 12 years old. After that point, there's no formal mathematics taught at all. So I think pre-algebra is probably the furthest anyone learnt in school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm a programmer, and it does sometimes come up where I have no idea how this maths works at all.
Mm.
Yeah, and I was told that, okay, when I'm working with this tutor, and he says, well, you've taken these courses, I said, he said that your problem is you don't understand basic algebra. I'm like, yeah, I did. I took the course. I passed the class. It was no problem. And he says, when was that? I'm like, oh, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And he said, well, then you're back to square one. Yeah, so that was awkward. All right, so somebody, Hive Psi, I got to read a couple more comments. It looks like geez, have I fallen behind?
No, you are not.
Yeah, someone did mention
Atheist
that
says,
gematria is very common, but gematria is not very mathematical. It's just addition, and addition
it's something that that sometimes Jews use to like predict certain stuff. I remember, for example, how they use the word for Barack Obama as, and its gematria word value is snake.
Whoa.
And Messiah.
I hate all of this.
Yeah, but there's so many. There's different ways of doing gematria. Like you can do one where you get the just add all the numbers together. There's one where you like add those numbers together to get a single number, and it's like, and a lot of times gematria isn't just like what does this number represent. It's also like, well, here's a verse in the Bible with the same
it's
numerical
ridiculous.
value, and somehow
I'm sorry
it's
that I'm
finding
interrupting,
patterns.
but I don't think we've finished the chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got to read a couple comments. I'm going to go through them and see. So Hive Psi says, it's encouragement, not just compliments. He makes complicated evolutionary subjects digestible to a layperson. We need more of that. Thank you very much for that. It really does mean something to me. And then Tesla Ranger says, any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. I disagree, because you can still explain science. Where I mean, you can, and then Alu says, what is the single best line you can give us to hit a creationist with if they baffle you with stupidity? I don't. There's not there's not like one line to hit somebody with. I mean, I guess this would be it. Show me the truth of it. What's that?
Okay, so this is what Scott Clifton said in his debate, or his video, Why I Don't Debate Creationists. He said, perhaps you should start operating under the assumption that your next contention with evolution is predicated on your own ignorance of the subject and not some piece of brilliance mysteriously overlooked by everyone in academia for the past 2 centuries.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right, so what verse are we
on?
That's
my favorite quote.
55.
I think we are in 55, yeah.
Ready?
55.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Let's start. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he saith to you, do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. All the face of the earth. I hadn't caught this the first time I read this story, that it was everywhere, like a flood. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was sore in all the lands. So God starved all these people to prove how great Joseph was all over the world.
Yeah, I've got a different translation. I'm on the NIV, and in this one it says it's over the whole country. But then after it says the whole country, And it does specify that we're talking about Egypt. It then says that all the world came to Egypt, for the famine was severe everywhere.
Yeah. So the word in 56 it uses pnei haaretz, and in 57 it also uses aretz, and aretz could mean the world, the land,
Doesn't it?
basically.
It says Be'eretz Mitzrayim.
Yeah,
In
It
like
says
like
it's in the
56
land of
land
or
of Egypt.
like it's used in like land of Israel, right?
No, but I'm
yeah.
saying over here in 56 it says, and the famine intensified in the land of Egypt.
Yeah, you're right.
And
Yeah, I
then it
didn't
says, and
catch
the
that.
inhabitants, and then the people of the land came, for the famine had intensified in the entire land. So that's that's the bit of that's the weirdness.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to thank everybody for being so efficient that we got through 2 chapters. So we did twice as fast as we normally would
3.
have.
3,
Three,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
39, 40, and 41. You're
41.
right. You're right. We did.
Yeah.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I'm checking because I was curious. I was checking uh, the Greek here, and yeah, so both of them use the. This might cause the translation issue in the English. So the Greek uses the word earth, like they have like tes geis and te ge, which is it means the same thing and just in different forms there. So it would be the earth. However, that could also mean land. Like it's been used as the exact same thing in the past. So that could cause a translation issue. But both translations are technically correct.
So when it comes to 56, when it says that the famine was severe throughout Egypt, but then 57 it says and all the world came to Egypt because the famine was severe everywhere.
Mhm.
I'm confused. How do those lines? What's the point of saying that it's throughout Egypt if it's throughout everywhere?
So what I can so it would be throughout Egypt would make
Maybe
the most sense, right? But
maybe at the time Canaan was part of Egypt,
sure,
Hmm.
yeah. It was
or at
I
least
think
they relied on the food from there to sustain themselves.
yeah, that is well, I mean they were kind of under Egypt at the time, I think. So
So
the
Mongolia, Australia, we're just gonna just pretend those don't exist.
exactly. So the reason why so the saying the world wouldn't make a lot of sense. And of course, if you're using the and again, this is from the Greek, it's not from the Hebrew. So I don't know how closely it resembles it. But in terms of translating, uh, the word that's used, so the first form, tes geist, in the genitive. So if you link it back to the preceding genitive, it would be Egypt. And then it's in the dative later, but that's actually just part of the sentence construction. So I don't think that hints at anything. I just think in Egypt would make the most sense.
Yeah, I think the Hebrew, I mean the Jewish translations, they just use the word land, not they don't say world. They
The
say
Aramaic translations, yeah, they use
But
And then
Ara
C,
doesn't never means world.
I think it means world. Let
Oh,
me
it can
check.
also mean. I mean,
C
it's a
Geezer,
direct cognate of Eretz.
C Geezer says Lawrence and Tomer make a good tag team with Aaron as referee.
Against who?
I don't know.
Um,
Trevor Wright says, Lawrence, what would you say in your own words should be the proper way to read and understand the Bible?
so number one, figure out the genre of text that you're reading because there are a whole bunch of different genres. You have to figure out the audience, the date. You need to figure out like the closest possible translation. So use text critical editions, uh, and that would be a good starting point. And then you have to learn about the ancient Near East and their use of motifs and their how they told stories in general. And in some cases, you can find like historical links to these things. And I mean, it's a whole ass process, right? So I can't really put it in like very succinct words, but I think there is a way of arriving at the proper conclusion, but it takes a lot of study for each little thing, because this was written a long ass time ago for
Reinterpreted as well.
Hmm?
And reinterpreted as well when it was compiled, right? The story?
in some cases, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
The proper
interpolated
way,
and
the
so
proper
on.
way to read the Bible is 7 years with us.
that's a good idea.
But if you go with the assumption, and I agree with what you just said, but if you go with the assumption that this is the absolute truth and the revealed word of the one true God breathed to the prophets and so forth, then you're not going to understand it at all.
It makes no sense through that lens that this is the literal word of the perfect God, the benevolent, omnipotent, omniscient God.
Yeah, you need to understand the historical context of what you're actually reading. So that is the most important thing. Now, of course, that is I'm using that as a catch-all term, but yeah, it is the most important thing.
Excellent.
I
On
what
that
I
note,
took from
You
this whole
forgot you
story-
can
Oh, go ahead. Is that
you
Xerxes?
can only
Go ahead.
I said you can only understand the Bible if you've been endowed by the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit has to come inside you in order for you to understand the Bible.
Oh my God.
I prefer they pull out.
Oh God.
Okay. Well, what I took from this
Be
story
evil in the
That's
eyes
not
of
just
the
a
Lord.
joke. It's literally what the Bible says in Second
is-
Corinthians. You have to have the Holy Spirit come inside you in order to know what the Bible means.
is the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament? I know it's in the New Testament. I don't remember.
Some people like to pretend that it's in the Old Testament. Let's put it that way.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
They like to pretend that Jesus is in
is-
there a whole lot
that
too.
too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some people like
And
to
like
imbibe in
the
their
allegories
Holy
like
Spirits.
Isaiah and the desert of Paran. But no, it seems to me like God has some weird BDSM fetish because he's super concerned with like you being on your knees and being able to come inside you without your consent and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
that last part. Yeah, that is a
come in
problem.
without-
Other than that, don't kink shame.
Yeah.
Like the whole
Brilliant.
What if kink shaming is my kink?
Let her finish.
Now what are you gonna do?
I have no answer to that. But anyway, the synopsis, the gist of this whole Joseph story to me seems like what they're trying to say is the force is with Joseph. Like everything he does, it comes out right. The famine thing, everywhere he goes, even in prison, the force was with him to mix our stories up even more.
Peter's trying to end the show before we even say goodbye. So
For some
let's
reason,
go ahead and say goodbye.
For some reason, I have a shortcut on my keyboard that I need to delete because I was typing in chat, I thought, but apparently not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever you say, man. Whatever you say.
Thank
I
you
thought it
guys
was
for
a
taking
brilliant
us through 3
excuse.
chapters.
That was not a
And
passive
so,
aggressive way of telling us to shut up.
yeah, so now it'll only
do
be
it.
like what, 7 years?
Which
Yeah.
we'll try.
That's 7
I will be
years.
33 years old when we're done with this. That's terrifying.
Yeah,
I will be very nearly dead.
I'll be
no,
30, like.
oh,
But
man.
we
You'll
did
outlive
3
us all,
today,
Lauren.
so that puts the average up.
Yeah,
like-
I think my show started in oh man, I don't even remember when exactly, but I think it started 6 years ago, and we're definitely going to get through I think we're probably going to be done with it in June. That is the projection, I guess, but it is not entirely clear. So if I'm checking it right now, we released our first episode August 27th of 2017, and we are still reading it. But we're almost done. We're starting Galatians tomorrow, so that is exciting, and I'm very excited to get into Revelation because that is.
I forgot to put the link to your show in here again.
It's all
man.
good. It's all good.
I think we should do the number 3 like in Monty Python, right? Take out the holy pin, count to 3, no more, no less. Throw it at your foe, who being naughty in the Lord's sight shall be blown to tiny bits. So don't go past the number 3.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. If anybody has a final comment, shoot it out because Peter's about to close us down. You got a few seconds.
Follow Milwaukee Atheists and join the Discord. Thank you.
Thank you all for watching.
Subscribe to my
See you
channel.
on, see you
Bye.
on Sunday/Monday.